Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to make a video on WebSockets. Basically, I was learning about WebSockets, not entirely learning about it. I know how WebSockets work and I work with Socket.io. But recently I faced some issues while creating an application for the Android and that kind of stuff. We have to use different clients for Android, React Native, and this, and usually it's hard to work with Socket.io. Not hard. It's pretty easy to work with Socket.io, but there are some challenges you have to face while working with Socket.io. So I was like exploring about WebSockets WebSockets which are native WebSockets in Node.js servers. So I came across the WS library, which is from the Node.js itself. There are some issues while working with it, as I'm going to use bun for it, not Node.js. For better setting purpose, I have no idea or no issue with Node.js. You can use Node.js, bun.js, anything you wanted to use. I'm going to use bun for this. So let's start the video. Basically, how to set it up is using bun. I'm going to create a blank library using bun. You can run it uh, using something called bun init. So if you use bun init command and you have bun installed in your machine, so you can definitely run this and you get a structure like this. So you can change it. I'm going to use NeoVim mostly. You can use anything you like. I'm going to use NeoVim and acha, don't use NeoVim. Let's use K. Made it big because of the project. I think you. What are the things you're going to need? Is firstly you can add the WebSocket, which is not the native WebSocket. You can add it using npm. Yeah, bun add also will be added. So these two libraries are actually needed for using to work with WebSocket, not the native WebSocket in Node.js. I'm using bun, so that's a different thing. But yeah, you can use WebSocket, you can use npm whatever you want. But that's one thing to install it. So to firstly, what is the structure going to look like? How can we create a WebSocket server in or in like Node.js itself? How can we create it? So basically, to create a native WebSocket server, have to firstly initialize some values. So this is pretty basic stuff. So initialization. The next step is creating the WebSocket server, and the next thing is creating or listening on the socket and sending the data. Or you can do something like error handling in socket. And what you can do, what what is the agenda of today? How to create a stateful connection. We're going to understand creating a stateful connection. So this will be our agenda for today, and I wanted to make more about it, more videos on this. But today I wanted to go to this particular depth. So initialization, before initializing, we have to import the WebSocket server. So we need to import the WebSocket server. You remember the WebSocket server, not WebSocket. WebSocket has two things. If you're using WebSocket directly, we're going to use the client version of it. If you're thinking WebSocket is coming natively, right? You are calling it a native thing. But how can we, how we are, why we are importing the WebSocket? WebSocket client is native. WebSocket server is native. We have to use the WebSocket server in order to use anything. So the WebSocket server is not native. It is native. You can like it is native to Node.js. Node how Node.js uses it, but WebSocket in general is native. Like the client is native to the JavaScript world. Got it? So you have to create the WebSocket server. We have to initialize the WebSocket server. So we have to do something like a WSS. WSS is WebSocket server. Don't freak out to call it. WebSocket server, we have to give it a port. So the port is coming under the curly braces. It is coming as the options. You have to use the port. You can see the types here. Port can be anything. I'm using 3000 as the port. We have created the port, initializes the WebSocket server. Now we need to create the WebSocket server or listen to the WebSocket server. Listen to the WebSocket server. You listen using the on attribute. You have to specify the event what you are using. I'm using the connection event. In the connection event, you get a callback. Inside the callback, you get the socket instance. So I'm going to use the socket instance as the right here directly. So inside the socket instance, you have to listen to the socket. So basically, you have to listen to the socket. We are listening to the WebSocket server. Now we have to listen to the socket. So you have to create an event using WebSocket again. Right here, there is the big difference between the socket IO and this. Socket IO has some events by default. Sockets doesn't have that. You have to use a single the message is sent into a single instance or the single what do you call it event, a simple event on single event, and you have to judge what you wanted to do with that event based on the message itself. That is why socket IO servers or socket IO client will be different from the WebSocket client. You can't use WebSocket client for a socket IO server. Got it? So you have to use message, which is the default event. There are some you can't create your own events directly. You have to use something called the type for that. We'll come into this, but yeah, you pretty much get the event. From the event. You are going to get a data, and inside the data, you have to uh, parse the data. Okay, so if you console log this, console log the data. Did I save it? Yeah, I did save it. If you console log the data and send something like more, can you see this? Yeah, I hope I close it right here. Yeah. So if I send something like made a connection right here, so there's a connection error. I haven't started the server. You have to start the server using one run hyphen watch to basically rerun it every time. So we have to remember okay, time is on. So I have started the server. Right now, if I send it or create a connection, so I created the connection, right? Now, what is happening? If I click on the message and I send a message, you can see the message is, but if you open the server, you will going to see there is a buffer which is coming. So you have to convert this to a string in order to make the most use of it. So this is converted to string. Now, if we send it again, I have to create a connection, send this, you're going to see properly what I'm getting, the mohawk, right? But we have to use something called structured data. We need some structured data. For structured data, what we use the JSON. So if you use the JSON, we're going to get the structured data. We use something like a message variable and we do something like JSON.parse data itself. So what is the error? So we can't directly specify the raw data. We have to use the JSON.toString. Now it can parse it. So if we send something like connect and we send the mohawk, we are not getting any results. In the console, we are getting an error. What is an error? Mohawk is not a JSON structure. So yeah, if we send a JSON structure, something like, I don't know, food bar, okay, no, foo bar. If we send something like this, there is no errors here are here, but we console log it, to console log the message, and if we connect and send this again, we can see there is a good structured data which is coming out. But now, what if the user sends not a JSON and it crashes the server? How can we recover from it? Or what do we need to do? We have to error handling. How can we do the error handling? The only way to do the error handling is try catch block. So we have to write try catch block. If we use the try catch block and we save this particular thing, we'll get a nice structure, and we have to console log the error. We can do this something like, we can console log. So if we send something like not a JSON structure, we are getting that same error. But big issue is, even if we handle this, we are not doing anything other than like previously it was handling it before. What is the what? How can we solve it? Is there a proper structure way to solve it? We wanted to send the user that you are sending the raw data, wrong data. How can we do that? To do that, you can do something like a, I'm going to give it a unknown, as I'm using TypeScript. You can anything, but as I'm using TypeScript, I wanted to do it on a more of TypeScript way. If you are using TypeScript, you should do this in a way. So if you do something like an instance of error, and then we console log this on a more structured way, or console log the message inside it. Now the same thing, we're going to see there is a nice error message. How can we send this error message to the user? For that reason, we are using something like a socket.send. That is a really good thing. We can use something called the socket. Where the socket is coming from. Here, how we are doing the error handling right here. This is the error handling part of the socket. So this is the error handling part of the socket. We are sending the error. How can we send the errors? You can send the error something like this. You can send the error something like error message. If you do something like this, you get a nice error message. But there is a big but here. There is a problem, which is consistency. It doesn't have the consistency. How can we make it consistent? If we are sending a JSON data, we should get a JSON data because it is the structure we are following. So what we can do, we can create a this JSON.stringify. We're going to send a JSON data. That's it. There is no like not a rocket science going on here. You have to send the data in a more error like format. Got it? This is it. If you are saving it, and you're going to get a nice error message from the server itself. We're going to send a proper uh, we're not going to get any errors right there. But what if we wanted to create an event? How can we create an event, and how can we make it stateful? Right now, it is not stateful. We are not storing anything. But what if I wanted to create a data? Like I wanted to send a username, and I want the WebSocket server to remember it. Right now, there is not anything for remembering it, right? We can use something like a Redis or something like that. Right now, I'm going to use something called in-memory database, or not a database. I'm using a hash map. So user to hash map, you can use something like this. Type something like, I'm going to make it string and WebSocket. So I'm going to create a map. This will be a map. So this will be a type WebSocket. But if you wanted to use the type WebSocket, it will be big S probably. Right now, this WebSocket has a problem. This is a WebSocket from the client side. This is not a WebSocket from the, by default, natively it's a WebSocket from the client side. We have to import the WebSocket type from the server side. Okay, so if you use it, we are going to make we're going to give this a type to WebSocket type. We have to store this WebSocket whenever there is a joining happen. How can we understand the joining? There is a big difference between this and socket type. What you need to do, you need to create a type right here. So if you give it a type, something called join, and if you send it to the user, we're going to get something like an parsing error, probably because I haven't given a comma right there. So right now it is coming as usual, so you'll get the. So what we can do, we can create something like a switch case. People like to use the shell statement. I don't prefer that. I prefer something like a switch case would be better. So if you use a switch case and use something called message.type, if we have to create another validation, right? Like if message.type or message.username doesn't exist, if we are sending it something like that way, we need this, right? You can send a new error message, right? You can send it on a more structured way, but if it goes to the user in a structured way, that's you don't need to follow this structure inside the code itself. So type or username account, right? This is pretty much it. That's it. If we are using like a switch case, we can use like the cases. So if a use case is join, what we can do? We can do something like uh, store it or map the username which we are getting from the user to the current socket. So we can do something like user dot set message dot username to the socket itself. Good. What is the next thing? We have break this. But what user doesn't provide a valuable or do something like that? I'm going to comment to it. But the user joins perfectly, we send them send something called you have perfectly joined the server. So you can send them a message, something like user joined. So if you create a connection and send it, you're going to get a message called if the user joined. But what if I don't give a proper typing right here? I do give it a type and user I haven't give the proper type. So I wanted to give them a default type. If the user doesn't type a proper thing, we can give them something called socket.send or we can throw a new error that type doesn't exist. The type doesn't exist error is coming up. So this is pretty much fine, right? We got it. We got most of it. But yeah, this is pretty much it. But what if the user wanted to disconnect? So what we can do, we can create another socket called disconnect or the socket.on close. The connection is in close. What we wanted to do, we wanted to delete this user, right? But we don't have the username. We don't know the username. We know about the socket, which socket does it belong to. So we have to store the user to the socket itself. So what we need to do, we need to create something called, we need to store this, the vice versa thing we have to store it to. for the disconnection part. To store the socket to the string itself. So this will be not socket again, this will be WebSocket. And whenever the user joins right here, we have to store the same thing with the socket to user part. This will be something like the socket, and it will be something called the message.user name. Got it? And we use the close. If you use the close or the close event, we have to delete the username. So what we the user to socket, we have to get the username first. So you do something like the const username equal to socket to username. You can get it from the socket itself. Socket to username get socket. What is the next thing? You have to delete the username. For deleting the username from the socket, you have to use the user to socket. We're going to delete it from the username itself. So the username. What if the username doesn't exist? So you have to do something like this. Got it? This is the whole structure. So what we can do, we can log this saying username disconnect. We can say something like this will be message.username disconnected. So if we connect to this and if we send this, we'll get an error because this is not a proper typing. But if we give it a proper typing, we'll get a user join right here. So Mohawk is connected, and if we disconnect it, we're going to get Mohawk disconnected. So this is pretty much about how you use WebSocket using the joining. The stateful connection part is basically this one. So this is pretty much the logic of the how you use WebSocket. We're going to go more into how broadcasting and sending the data works on a more linear fashion. We're going to use something called the for loops and for sending it to the client. So yeah, this is pretty much it for today.